And David received his MFA from New York University, Tisch School of the Arts, and his BA in English, Literature, and Russian language from Dickinson College, magna cum laude, Phi Beta Kappa. David is currently a lecturer in the Arts Administration program at Skidmore College and resides in the village of Cambridge, New York, with his wife and children.
Thank you, Sally. I feel like that it's time to revise my resume and my bio, because I feel like the epilogue on that should be, and then there was a global pandemic and everything changed. So I'm happy to talk to you all today. I'm honored to be here. Sally asked me to do this, and I'll do almost anything for Sally Sugarman. I've been a big fan of hers since I moved up here 6 years ago. So I thought I would talk about theater writ large a little bit, about what Hubbard Hall does, and then what's happening during the pandemic. What we've learned so far over the last 6 months, what we don't know, things that are happening locally, things that are happening nationally. So I moved up here about 6 years ago from Washington, D.C. My wife works at Bennington College, so I have a strong Bennington tie. She's director of communications there. And we wanted to move up partially for the quality of life and partially because Hubbard Hall is such a rare gem that you don't find many organizations that are really entangled in their community doing theater and music and dance, opera, classes. So we have, if you don't know much about Hubbard Hall, we have 4 buildings, 4 historic buildings, the main opera house, and then 3 other buildings. Our main stage opera house, a black box theater, dance studio, visual arts studio, boardroom, mixed use building. And we're lucky in this moment that we own those buildings. So Hubbard Hall itself was built in 1878 by Martin Hubbard and Mary Hubbard, who's going to be one of the stars of the show that we're doing in October, the Susan B. Anthony Project, that I'll talk a little bit about in a minute. It thrived until the 1920s, whenever movies came in, and the movie house moved into Cambridge, and vaudeville started to die out, and the stock market crashed, and it went dark then, but luckily it was always busy because there were 2 storefronts that were kept active while the hall kind of went dark upstairs. But then in 1977, Benji White, David Cute, a bunch of other people in the community came together to raise money and reopen the hall when they found out it was for sale. So in 1978, we became a nonprofit organization. So we've been a nonprofit for the last 42 years. My predecessor, Benji White, was at the organization for 37 years, which is a long time for a founder to run a theater. But we love Cambridge. When I first came up here to meet with the board, I was blown away by the organization. So we do theater year round. We do a summer Shakespeare typically. We do performances on the main stage in the black box. We do classes year round. We do a dance showcase. We started classes this week, I'm happy to say. We're still doing classes. So we reopened at the top of July and had summer programs for students with a max of 10 kids in the space at any given time, all kinds of safety protocols in place. And we served about 90 students over the summer, luckily with no incidents related to COVID. And so it was all safe and wonderful this summer. And so we launched fall classes this week that'll last about 10 weeks. And about 18 classes started this week. So we're gonna serve over 100 students this fall, just in September and October and early November, because we'll wrap up by November 20th. So up until this year, we've been doing theater. We do plays, we do musicals, we do a summer Shakespeare. As Sally said before this, I was at Arena Stage, that is a $130 million facility, an $18 million budget, and we would do 10 shows a year. We would do big musicals, new plays, new works. And I've luckily made my living in the arts the last 25 years. I've been lucky to do nothing else but work in the arts for the last 25 years, which is very, very rare. I was an actor first. I trained at Tisch, got my MFA from the NYU graduate acting program, but then wanted to teach and direct, and I got more into directing, more into teaching. And the first thing that took me out of New York was working at the Shakespeare Theater Company in DC, where I got to run education programs and for the first time teach students Shakespeare. And that was an amazing experience because you got to see how bringing in live theater into a classroom met a lot of students in ways that they weren't being met in the traditional learning environment. So some kids who just didn't connect with the idea that you sit at a desk and listen all day. Some of those kids, when they got up and they actually started to play and they got to play text, came alive. And so they would do their own Shakespeare play on our main stage every semester. So we would work with 15 schools, about 1,000 kids every semester on whatever play we were doing on the main stage, and then they would do their own version. So I did that for 4 years, having done a lot of Shakespeare as an actor and director. And then I got the chance to run Young Playwrights Theater. And that was where I ran a company that taught students playwriting in public schools and then would produce their work. So we were producing student-written plays year-round in tours and festivals and in residencies. And so that really went the next level for me, about giving students the opportunity to write. Whatever they wanted to write, they could write. So we teach them playwriting, and then they would run with their own ideas. And so they would create plays, and we would have professional actors and professional directors and designers all produce their work. So the kids were the writers, and they were in charge of the whole thing. Their vision was what we were aiming for. So bringing that to life was kind of our mission, and that company continues to thrive. I grew up in my dad's church, so I also had a sort of sense of theater from a very young age. But it wasn't until high school that I did theater, and I thought, oh, this is really great. I loved it, but I thought I won't really be able to do this. But when I went to Dickinson and was an English major, I got to do a lot of plays. I went abroad to England my junior year and got into some professional Shakespeare over there, and that was sort of the beginning of me feeling like I was really going to do it professionally. So theater for me has always been the place where we come together, the community can connect, people can learn, they can express themselves. That's why when I came to the hall, one of my big missions has been getting the hall off our campus. So we've had contracts with public school systems the last couple of years, Hoosick Falls and Cambridge, to bring theater into the classroom, to do theater with students on our campus. Because it always really feels like it's kind of the public square. It's the place where we really actually as human beings can see each other, can listen to new ideas or old ideas, can have a reaction together, can breathe together, can talk about what we saw right afterwards. And so I think that's why it's hard right now to not be doing it. So in March, last time I was in New York was March 1st, and I was there actually to look at a play that we had helped develop at the hall. We have a partnership with the Bushwick Star, that's a theater in Brooklyn, that focuses on new work. And one of the things I did at Arena was do residencies with writers and with artists. So we started a residency company a couple years ago where New York City will come up to the hall and work on their play or work on their idea for a week and then be produced in Brooklyn. And so I was in New York March 1st to see one of the plays that we helped develop back in December. By March 12th or 13th, we were getting that feeling from the state and elsewhere that things were bubbling up with COVID, but we were in the middle of a production of The Addams Family for the drama club at Cambridge. She suspended it, but eventually canceled it because of COVID. And so we had a couple of months where we were really quiet and dormant. And then July, we came back in full mask with actors on microphone so that we had the text amplified so you could hear it clearly. People every time for about 5 performances to see Shakespeare outside. And that was the first time that we actually got to do theater. Most theaters right now in the pandemic have not produced anything since March. They're waiting to get more permissions from Actors Equity, from the Actors Union to actually produce. They're waiting to feel like it's more safe to be able to do what they do. We're lucky in some ways in that the hall has always had flexible seating. The hall has always been the kind of space where the chairs move and there could be a dance in there or a rally or a theater performance. And so we're able to be more flexible about how we do theater. We did some chamber music this July as well, where we had just 40 people in the seats. But a lot of theaters are disadvantaged right now because they have buildings that are 500 seats or 1,000 seats. A friend of mine, Kenny Neal, still works at the Kennedy Center in the education department. And I spoke to him about 2 weeks ago, and the Kennedy Center is still waiting on even talking about producing again. They don't know when they're going to do it again, because their spaces are so large that if they don't have 800 people show up to a show, they can't actually afford to do it. So we're lucky that our model has always been a little community and professional artists so that we can afford to pull off a play. So we're going to do the Susan B. Anthony project in October. That's a new play that we've created with the community about Susan B. Anthony. She actually ran a women's suffrage convention at Hubbard Hall in 1894. She was at the hall. She spoke at part of the convention. It was during the year where they were trying to get the word male struck out of the New York Constitution because it said only men can vote. And so she was trying to rally people to change that. So the play has been written with about 250 public school students. We work with students in Hoosick Falls and Cambridge and Greenwich from 4th grade through 11th grade to write about women's suffrage, civil rights, all those kind of great topics. And it's sort of baked into a new play now about her and about Mary Hubbard, who's really the unsung hero of Hubbard Hall, whose husband Martin paid to have the hall built, but Mary ran the hall for 25 years after Martin died. So she really was the one that ran the hall for the most of the time in its first iteration. So that play we'll do in October, and we'll do it with 3 actors and 6 students and a full band. Bob Warren, who's based in Greenwich, has written new original music for the play. So there's new music that Susan B. Anthony and Mary Hubbard and Sojourner Truth, who's in it as a character, will be singing. And we'll do it for 40 or 50 people maximum in the audience. Everybody will need to be masked. We'll have actors on microphone again so that you can hear it. And we're going to do about 6 or 7 performances just in one weekend so we can try to get as many people in the door as we can. And that's just sort of the way theater right now is going to operate, is we have to have all the safety protocols in place in order to do what we do. And unfortunately, places like Actors Equity, that is the actors union, hasn't yet come to terms entirely with the COVID pandemic to figure out how they how they work with organizations or other theaters that are larger to get them working again. A friend of mine runs Milwaukee Rep in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Chad Bauman, who's the executive director. And Milwaukee has 3 large stages in their theater complex. They're a budget of about 18 million at this point every year. And they have not done anything since March because they can't get the unions to agree in any way to let them operate, even though they worked with the medical professionals in Milwaukee and submitted to Equity a 50-page report on all the different protocols they were going to put in place. The union has still said, no, we're not going to let anybody do this. We actually had Equity, Equity grants us a special appearance agreement, it's called, for us, because we don't hire all union people, but we do every once in a while want to hire a union person. And they've suspended giving any of those licenses this year at all. They're just not considering it. So we had an Equity actor first cast as Susan B. Anthony, who decided she couldn't do it because Equity wouldn't let her do it. So we had to recast that part. And that's one of the things happening in theater right now is we're trying to figure out ways to do it outside, safely, smaller casts, smaller audiences. We're really good at innovation. Theater creating solutions. But some of the structures of institutions, especially the unions, aren't able to actually figure it out with us. And so they're just telling us to sort of suspend. In the classroom still, doing some semblance of theater that we can is so important because I think, like all of us are experiencing now, we're not socializing enough, we're not together enough, we're not hearing each other's voices live enough. When you do, you get the sense of, for me, I get a sense of revitalization when I get to do that. When we had chamber music this summer and we heard live music, it was a balm for people who were able to hear that. I'm teaching again at Skidmore, so I teach financial management for the arts right now. And I teach that twice a week in person, in mask, with our whole class in mask. And it's great just to be in a room together when we can do that. So for me, again, theater is that sense of community, of consideration for each other, of being able to come together. And so in this moment, it feels more important than ever to be able to do it however we can do it. So when we get to back to the big size of being able to do big musicals, big shows, we will, but for right now, it's important just to keep going. You may know or you may not know that Broadway now in New York is probably dark until spring of 2021 at least, if not later. And that's billions of dollars of loss. The arts so far nationally have lost almost $11 billion in income that we should have gotten this year. It contributes several billion dollars to the national economy. So as long as the arts are suspended, it's a problem for all those businesses in New York, our businesses locally. The cafe that we had in Hubbard Hall has closed since March because they weren't able to operate enough to keep going. So like we all know, the arts has this ripple effect throughout the economy, as everything does, where because Broadway and other things are not happening, every city that has a regional theater right now, the regional theater is stopped. So that means all the restaurants around it, all the hotels, all the other economy is stopped until that thing gets going again. So I think that's where we are. We're planning on going dark basically December, January, February, because we know it's going to be tough to do things during the winter once the doors have to close and the air has to be turned off. So we're really looking now at March 2021 as the time when we'll rally back. So, but it all depends on when we have a vaccine, as we know, and we can feel really safe about it. But that's my point of view. Interesting that the status quo is sort of wiped away. So it's all about innovation and creating this year. And given the fact that we do that every day in the theater, I think we're up to it. It's just a matter of getting all the other bureaucracies to play with us so we can actually do it. So I'll take questions if there's any questions about all of that I just said.
I have a question.
Yeah, Tom.
David, at Hubbard Hall, how much of your revenue is ticket sales and from that kind of revenue versus donations and contributions?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I felt good about coming up to the hall because when I got here, and still to this day, our income is basically split 50-50. So 50% of our budget comes from earned, 50% from contributed, which you probably know is a really good mix. Typically it's 60-40, or by the time I left Arena Stage was really at like an 80-20, 80% earned. So we had to make that box office. But everything has dropped, as you probably know, everything has dropped out. So while we're not getting the earned income that we should be because we have to have 40 people in the house and we can't do as many performances, our classes are also limited to 8 people now. So a dance class now is only 8 kids as opposed to 12 before. So that's been cut back. The other thing we're dealing with is that we had to suspend classes in March. So we asked everyone if they would prefer a refund or a credit. And most people luckily said, we'll just take a credit. But we're paying those credits out now. So in some ways, the classes we're doing right now are earning us no money because we're paying the credits back that we owe people in the spring, rightly so. And for funding, we know donations are going to drop this year. So we've budgeted for that because everybody's in a tighter place. We do luckily get most of our donations at the $200 or less level. So we have a lot of small donations, which is great. This is very healthy. But New York State Council on the Arts, that's the New York State funder for the arts, has already slashed funding because New York State has slashed them. So our general operating grant just got cut by 20%, and they've let us know that our theater grant that should be $10,000 in the spring may or may not be showing up. So NYSCA is cutting the arts a lot. Things like those contracts I spoke about with public schools are not happening this year. So that's another $25,000 maybe between the contracts with schools that's not going to happen. Because they've been, Hoosick Falls was going to do it again with us in April. They said, yes, we're still going to do it. By August, the superintendent had to say, we're not going to do it because we just got a $2 million deficit from the state handed to us. So at least our schools at Hoosick Falls and Cambridge, they've cut all extracurriculars. So you can imagine the damage to student enhancement that's happening this year. Like there's nothing for what little there was. So no sports, no arts, no nothing. And we've committed to trying to still we do the drama club at Cambridge at the hall. So we do the spring musical for Cambridge at the hall. I'm trying to figure out if we can still do that. We'd like to still do that because we don't want to abandon the students. So we're trying to figure out how we might do that with a special fundraiser or something. So it's a good 50-50 split, but the 50-50 is all down. So I would say our budget is currently probably about 50% of what it normally should be. So we went from 500 to about 250,000 this year. And it continues to drop because every week or month we get another news bulletin from the state or elsewhere that goes, we're not coming either. So we'll do a fundraiser in October 17th. We're having a special performance of the Susan B. Anthony Project, if any of you want to come. It's a special performance at 6 p.m. that night to raise money for the hall. And Carrie Warner is going to come, who's one of our local New York Assembly people, to help us unveil a new history marker that's going to go in front of the hall that's going to celebrate Susan B. Anthony's presence in 1894 and the opening of Hubbard Hall in 1878. So that'll be a fundraiser. And then we'll do an end-of-year campaign. We do a mailing in November, typically, like everybody does. And we'll be trying to get donations then.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are you doing anything virtually? I know a lot of theaters are raising some money by putting on performances virtually.
We did, we pumped out in March, April, May. We were really pumping out a lot of content, 3 blasts on our website. We were showing a lot of our recent productions over the last 2 years that we have film of. And we were doing some new short videos, short content, learning about playwriting or learning about this or learning about that. But I decided early on to do it for free because it really felt like the last thing people needed in the spring was to say, here's a thing and it's $20 to watch it. We really wanted to disseminate it freely. So we just made the choice to do that for free. If we get to a place in 2021 where we're still not producing fully, we may rethink that and redo it. But I'm also just super sick of the Zoom theater and the online stuff, so we're trying to do as much as we can live in person. So we have to kind of balance how much effort are we putting in this, how much effort are we putting in that. And there's so much white noise now online that it feels like everybody's kind of up to here with streaming video. So we may or may not do more of that, but we have pumped out a lot of the theater we did the last 2 years. We pumped out in the spring for free. So, and the union gave us flack about that too, which we just said, whatever, come and get us.
I have 2 questions. Sorry, Beth,
Yeah.
I'm going to do it. The easy one is the October show regarding Mary Hubbard. That's what date?
It's going to be the October 16th through the 18th. And it's on our, if you go to hubbardhall.org, the homepage has a slider with Susan B.'s picture on it, where
Okay.
you can buy tickets.
Okay, and the related question, does anyone know, maybe you do, David, if we're leaving Vermont to go to New York, do we have to quarantine when we come back?
No, I don't think so. I mean, so how long are you going to be in the city?
No, if I go to Hubbard Hall.
Oh, if you go to Hubbard Hall. I don't think Vermont has any restrictions on New York State at this moment. I would double check it, but I don't think so.
Beth
I
is
mean,
nodding.
I go to Vermont all the time because because my wife works in Bennington and she's sometimes still coming over. We don't do anything over here, so I'd be surprised if Vermont requires that for a day.
Washington County is okay. I mean, it's on a county by county basis. And I believe you can see that map at the Vermont Department of Health website.
Okay, thanks.
It's the Vermont Leisure Travel Map that's been updated on Fridays until next week, when it will begin to be updated on Tuesdays, which is good because you can actually plan your weekends ahead of time. But yeah, Rensselaer, Washington, those are counties to watch.
Yeah.
Were you done, Kristen? Can I ask my question? Okay. So David, you mentioned going dark in like December, January, February, but also the need for extracurriculars. So when you say going dark, does that include the classes that you're offering to? Would it be Is that just not
Yeah.
profitable enough to?
So we kind of made the decision, like a lot of places were sort of forecasting that, like Skidmore, where I teach, we're done at Thanksgiving. So a lot of places are like live in person is going to end at the Thanksgiving holiday, because that's when winter will really kick in and the doors will close and it'll be hard to be outside. So we did the same thing, where our classes right now here for the fall are going to end November 22nd. And then typically we would start up again. Typically we would go into December and we would start up again in January. But given the fact that, like right now when we do dance classes, all the doors are open, fans are blowing the air outside, plus everybody's in a mask. We just figure January, February is going to be too cold to open anything. And so being inside in closed spaces is probably a bad idea. So we're just going to proactively say March, April, May, June is our spring classes. And I don't know, my kids are back in class at Cambridge. They went back starting last week. But we don't quite know. I think the school was supposed to end at Thanksgiving as well. I don't know yet what they're forecasting in terms of January, February, March. So, and they haven't told us yet what spring extracurriculars may or may not look like. Over here, they've nixed all sports and everything for the fall, but they haven't, I think, like all of us don't know enough yet what January, February might look like. We'll have to see what November, December looks like. So for right now, we're just not going to do it during the dead of winter. So knowing we can save on heat and electricity and all that as well, and that we're probably not going to be able to produce performances then either. Our last thing right now is October 25th. In terms of performances, we're having a blues guitarist actually here at the hall who still is able to do it for 40 people. So he was willing to do that. That's part of the hard part about presenting anybody, is that you have a base rate where, like, if they're not, yeah, the dead winter just feels like it's a time to kind of go pause.
I just had a quick thing. When you mentioned one of your shows was done 6 to 7 times over the course of a weekend to get as many people in as you could. That's pretty amazing. I mean, how were your actors after that weekend? I mean, that's 3 shows a day or more. I mean, that's pretty phenomenal.
I mean, that's going to be, so that's Susan B. Anthony coming up, but we did do 5 for the Shakespeare. And luckily that was only an hour and 15 minutes, as will be Susan B. Anthony. So I think if we were doing a 2 or 3 hour musical, it'd be a lot harder to ask that of actors. So I think the fact that we're kind of doing theater continually that is more bite size, with that idea that then you could do a 2 p.m. like on the Saturday there, we're probably doing a 2 p.m., a 6 p.m. and an 8 p.m. If it weren't a small, short enough show, it'd be pretty impossible.
Mm-hmm. And I was also just checking out your website, hubbardhall.org. It's a great website. So much. I mean, I had not realized how much was going on there. So
Thank you.
hubbardhall.org. I mean, please check it out. There's a lot of good content there.
Thank you. Any other questions? Great. Well, it's been great talking to you all.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, David.
Thanks, Sally.
Luck.